At my wife's company party, she introduced me to 3 executives as the repair guy and added, "I married him before I realized I could probably do better." They laughed, not loudly but enough. I didn't argue or embarrass her. I finished my drink, shook their hands, and left with her 20 minutes later. She spent the drive home insisting it had been a harmless joke. 3 weeks later, she pushed her phone across our kitchen table and told me her biggest project was in trouble. "Call your elevator people," she said. Then I saw my name listed in her project file as the contingency plan. I picked up the phone, but I didn't make the call. The screen showed an email chain between my wife, her project director, and 2 executives at her company. Most of it was about construction delays at a downtown office building they were renovating for a major client. Near the bottom, my wife had written, "If the elevator contractor cannot recover the schedule, my husband has strong relationships throughout the local vertical transportation industry. I'm confident I can get additional resources involved." The email had been sent almost 2 months earlier, before the company party. I looked across the table at her. "When did I agree to this?" She leaned against the counter with her arms folded. "You didn't agree to anything." I said I had access to people. "You said you were confident you could get them involved. Because you can." That was apparently the part she couldn't understand. I had the phone numbers. Therefore, in her mind, she had the phone numbers. I had worked as an elevator technician for 13 years. I serviced office towers, hospitals, apartment buildings, and hotels. Most days involved preventive maintenance, troubleshooting doors, replacing worn components, documenting safety issues, and explaining to building managers why a repair couldn't be rushed just because an important person wanted it done by Friday. Occasionally, it involved helping firefighters get people out of a stalled car or working until 2 in the morning, because a hospital couldn't operate normally with half its elevators down. My wife, Lauren, knew all of that. We had been married for 7 years. She also knew that the people she wanted me to call weren't random contractors waiting for work. They were mechanics, adjusters, supervisors, consultants, and service managers I had built relationships with over more than a decade. Calling one of them wasn't the same as searching for a company online. A personal call meant I was asking them to take me seriously, interrupt their schedules, and potentially attach their reputations to a project that was already failing. Lauren tapped the phone with one finger. "I need you to call Mike Hanley and that independent consultant you worked with on the hotel project." "No." She stared at me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slide the phone back dramatically. I just placed it on the table between us. "No. I'm not calling Mike, and I'm not asking anyone to jump into a half-finished modernization job without seeing the contracts, inspection reports, and current scope. We have all of that. Then your company can hire a consultant and send it to them through the proper process." "We don't have time for the proper process. That doesn't make it my emergency." Her face tightened. "You're seriously doing this because of one joke?" The party had been held on the top floor of a hotel Lauren's company had helped redevelop. There were probably 100 people there. Employees, clients, consultants, and spouses standing around with drinks and small plates of food. Lauren had been nervous all week. She was hoping to be promoted from senior project manager to project director, and several executives who would influence that decision were attending. I had bought a new jacket because she said my usual suit looked dated. I had also left work early, showered at the shop, and driven through almost an hour of traffic to be there. For the first 40 minutes, everything had been normal. Then Lauren brought me over to meet her division president, a regional vice president, and one of the company's largest clients. The division president asked what I did. Before I could answer, Lauren smiled and said, "Evan's the repair guy, elevators mostly. I married him before I realized I could probably do better." One executive gave a quick laugh. Another looked down at his drink. The client's wife glanced at me and then at Lauren, like she was trying to decide whether we had some kind of private joking relationship. We didn't, not like that, I said. I'm an elevator technician. The client asked me whether elevators actually fell the way they did in movies, and I answered his question. We talked for another minute about safety systems. Lauren changed the subject. I stayed for 20 more minutes because leaving immediately would have turned the insult into a public scene. I didn't want that. Part of me also wondered whether I was being too sensitive. That was my mistake. I spent those 20 minutes giving Lauren the benefit of the doubt she hadn't given me. In the car, I asked her why she had said it. She laughed once as if she still expected me to join in. Oh, come on. They know I'm joking. What was the joke? That I could do better. I understood the words. What made them funny? She looked out the passenger window. It was self-deprecating. It wasn't about you. It was about us. No, it was about my job. She said corporate events required a certain kind of humor. She said I was being literal. Then she told me that people in her office used phrases like repair guy because they didn't understand the difference between a mechanic, a technician, and a general maintenance worker. I asked why she hadn't explained the difference. She said that would have made the conversation awkward. Apparently humiliating me had been the smoother option. I slept in the guest room that night. By the next morning, she had reduced the entire thing to a misunderstanding. She kissed my cheek before leaving for work and said, "Can we not turn this into a week-long crisis?" I should have pushed harder then. Instead, I told myself that 7 years of marriage mattered more than one ugly sentence. The problem was, it wasn't only one sentence. About a year earlier, at dinner with one of her coworkers, Lauren had said I worked in building maintenance. I corrected her afterward, and she said she had only simplified it because nobody wanted a technical explanation. Another time, she introduced me to a neighbor by saying I fixed broken stuff downtown. Neither incident seemed worth a fight on its own. I had laughed them off because I didn't want to sound insecure about my work. The truth was, I wasn't insecure about it. Lauren was. I just hadn't wanted to admit that. Now she stood in our kitchen asking me to use the same profession she had turned into a punchline. I opened the project documents she had forwarded and scanned the summary. Her company was renovating a 24-story office building. The elevators were part of a larger modernization project that included new controls, updated fixtures, electrical work, and changes needed for the building's fire service system. The original schedule was aggressive but possible. Then the elevator subcontractor lost several experienced people to another company. Equipment arrived late. Work that should have been completed in sequence had been done out of order. 2 elevator cars had failed their initial inspection because several items were unfinished or improperly adjusted. The subcontractor was still technically responsible for the work, but the relationship had deteriorated. Lauren's company was threatening to remove them from the project. The problem was that established elevator companies rarely wanted to take over another contractor's unfinished installation. There were too many unknowns. If something failed 6 months later, everyone would argue about which company had caused it. Any new contractor would have to inspect the existing work, document deficiencies, negotiate responsibility, find available labor, and coordinate another inspection. That took time. Lauren's client wanted employees moving into the building in less than 4 weeks. "What exactly did you tell your director I could do?" I asked. "I said you could help us identify people. That email says additional resources. Those are basically the same thing. They're not." She pulled out the chair across from me. "Evan, I'm not asking you to personally work on the elevators. I need introductions. Mike's company could send a crew to evaluate the job. Your consultant friend could tell us what has to happen before the next inspection. Mike's crews are booked. You don't know that. I talked to him last week. Then ask him to make room." That sentence settled something for me. Lauren wasn't asking me for expertise. She was asking me to spend my reputation because her project plan had failed. I told her I would explain the normal process. I would help her understand the reports. I would even give her the names of professional organizations and publicly listed consulting firms. But I would not call friends and former coworkers and pressure them to rescue her schedule. "You're choosing your pride over my career," she said. "No. I'm refusing to trade on the same profession you treated like a punchline." She stood up. "So this is punishment. It's a boundary. It's revenge." Revenge would be calling people and telling them not to work with you. I'm not doing that. I'm just not volunteering them. She paced to the other side of the kitchen. "You know how important this project is. I also know you listed me as a resource without asking me. I assumed my husband would help me. You assumed the repair guy would be useful when you needed something repaired." She went silent. I regretted the line as soon as I said it, not because it was untrue, but because it sounded too clean. Real arguments usually weren't clean. Lauren grabbed her phone and went upstairs. We barely spoke for the rest of the night. The next morning, while I was checking a controller at a medical office building, my phone vibrated in my pocket. The caller was Daniel Mercer, Lauren's project director. I had met him once at a company picnic. He started by saying he wasn't calling to pressure me. He just needed to clarify what, if anything, I had committed to providing. I stepped into the machine room hallway where I could hear him properly. "I didn't commit to anything," I said. There was a pause. "Understood. What were you told?" "That you had relationships with multiple service providers and could help us obtain an emergency evaluation if necessary. I can explain why companies are hesitant to inherit the job. I can't promise that anyone will take it. That's fair." He sounded tired, not angry. Then he asked whether hiring an independent elevator consultant before approaching another contractor would be the correct first step. I told him it usually was, because the consultant could provide a neutral assessment of what had been completed, what needed to be redone, and what information a new contractor would require. I did not give him a private phone number. I did not make an introduction. He thanked me and ended the call. Lauren called less than 10 minutes later. "What did you say to Daniel?" "The truth. You made me look like I lied." I told him I hadn't committed to the project. "You could have said we had discussed it." "We hadn't. You knew I might need help." Knowing that my wife's company worked on buildings was not the same as agreeing to serve as an unpaid emergency vendor network. I told her that. She hung up on me. Her company hired a consultant 4 days later through its normal procurement process. The consultant spent 2 days reviewing the project and another day on-site. His report confirmed what I had expected. No reputable company was going to promise a recovery date before conducting a detailed inspection of the existing work. Several completed items would need to be opened, tested, or documented again. The electrical contractor also had unfinished work affecting the elevator schedule. The original subcontractor agreed to return with a reduced crew while the consultant supervised a recovery plan. The building did not open on the original date. It also didn't become a total disaster. The lower floors opened 19 days late. Employees assigned to the upper floors continued working remotely for several additional weeks, while the remaining cars were completed and inspected. Lauren's company had to reschedule a client event and absorb some additional costs. One project payment was delayed until certain milestones were reached. Nobody was arrested. Nobody was marched out of the office. Lauren was not fired. What happened was slower and more believable. Daniel required her to prepare a full explanation of how the schedule risk had been handled. During that review, the executives learned that her backup plan had depended partly on personal contacts she had never actually secured. She remained on the project, but she was removed as the main person managing the elevator recovery. Another project manager took over the contractor meetings while Lauren handled documentation, client updates, and the rest of the renovation. Her promotion review was postponed until the following quarter. She told me all of this in pieces, usually after dinner, with the tone of someone reporting damage after a storm. At first, every update ended with some version of the same accusation. If you had made one call, none of this might have happened. I kept reminding her that my contacts couldn't magically create crews, parts, or inspection appointments. She said we would never know because I hadn't tried. That was the argument she preferred. It allowed her to imagine that I had possessed a secret button and refused to press it. About 2 weeks into the delay, she came home and placed her bag on the floor beside the couch. "I'm sorry I embarrassed you at the party," she said. It was the first apology that had sounded remotely serious. I waited, but I still think you overreacted afterward. There it was. She sat beside me and explained that she had been under enormous pressure. The company had been talking about her promotion for months. She had wanted the executives to see her as relaxed and confident. I asked why insulting me had helped with that. She said she had panicked. Then she said something about the spouses at those events being lawyers, finance directors, architects, and consultants. "And I'm a mechanic," I said. "That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant." She rubbed both hands over her face. "I knew they were going to ask what you did. I didn't know how they would react. They probably would have said, 'That's interesting,' and moved on. Maybe. Or they might have respected it. Maybe. But you didn't give them the chance." She nodded without looking at me. For the first time, I understood the full reason behind the joke. Lauren wasn't trying to entertain them. She was signaling that she knew my job was beneath their world, and that she was in on the joke rather than the subject of it. That realization hurt more than the laughter had. We started marriage counseling the following month. I didn't do it because I had already decided to leave. I did it because I hadn't. I wanted to know whether the person I had spent 7 years with had made one cruel decision under pressure, or had finally revealed something she had believed for a long time. Lauren initially described the conflict as a communication failure. The counselor asked her to repeat exactly what she had said at the party. Without the hotel, the drinks, or the executives laughing, the sentence sounded worse. Lauren couldn't hide behind the room anymore. She admitted that she had become increasingly self-conscious as she moved higher in the company. Many people around her came from wealthier families and had spouses with impressive job titles. She had started feeling as though every part of her personal life was being evaluated. "I thought the joke would show I was aware of the difference," she said. "What difference?" I asked. She didn't answer. The counselor waited. Finally, Lauren said, "The difference in status." It wasn't a dramatic confession. She didn't call me worthless. She didn't say she had never loved me. In some ways, that made it more painful. She loved me privately. She was embarrassed by me publicly. I had my own part to acknowledge. For years, I had allowed her to rename my work whenever the accurate version made her uncomfortable. I had given her free advice about building projects. I had answered questions at dinner, reviewed schedules, explained inspection delays, and helped her understand proposals. Every time she called it a small favor, I agreed. I thought being useful was the same thing as being valued. It was. The elevator project was eventually completed. Lauren told me the final inspection passed after the remaining corrections were made. The consultant's closeout report specifically noted that the recovery schedule had failed because the original plan had not allowed enough time for testing, documentation, and reinspection. Months earlier, during a casual conversation, I had warned Lauren about exactly that problem. She had heard me. She had simply preferred the answer her executives wanted. After the project ended, her company held another client reception. Lauren asked me to attend. She said she would introduce me properly this time. I told her I wasn't ready. She accused me of holding the party over her forever. Then she stopped herself and apologized. That was how most of our progress worked. One honest step followed by a reflexive attempt to minimize what had happened. She did become more careful when speaking about my work. She stopped calling me a maintenance worker. She told her parents that I was an elevator technician when they used the wrong term. But respect performed as an assignment didn't feel the same as respect that had always been there. The larger problem was that Lauren still believed my refusal had caused her professional setback. She could apologize for the party. She could admit that listing me as a project resource without permission had been wrong. But whenever she talked about the delayed promotion, resentment returned. One night, almost 4 months after the original argument, she said, "I lost an opportunity over one stupid joke." I asked whether she truly believed the joke was why her promotion had been postponed. She said, "You know what I mean. No, your promotion was postponed because the project had no real contingency plan, and you told your company that I was one. You could have made that true. That was the end for me, not the legal end, not immediately. There were no suitcases thrown onto the lawn, no screaming match, no family members arriving to take sides. I moved into a short-term apartment near my shop 2 weeks later. We continued counseling for another month while living separately. Lauren said she wanted to fix the marriage. I believed she wanted the discomfort to end. Those weren't necessarily the same thing. Her sister thought I was being stubborn. One of my brothers thought I should have left the night of the party. Daniel never contacted me again, which was exactly what a professional person should have done. A coworker of Lauren sent me a brief message saying she had felt uncomfortable when Lauren made the joke but hadn't known whether speaking up would make things worse. That was the only outside validation I received. It was enough. Lauren kept her job. She was assigned to a smaller renovation while Daniel managed the next phase of the office project. Her promotion remained possible, but she would have to rebuild confidence over time. I didn't celebrate that. I had never wanted her to fail. I had wanted her to understand that my work, my relationships, and my reputation did not belong to her simply because we were married. 6 months after the party, we agreed to make the separation permanent. Lauren gave me a real apology during our last counseling session. She said she had spent years enjoying the stability my work gave our life, while pretending that her office title made her more successful than I was. She also admitted that, when the project failed, blaming me had been easier than admitting she had made promises she couldn't keep. I believed her. I forgave her eventually. Forgiveness didn't require me to return. I still work on elevators. I still come home with grease on my hands some days. I still answer emergency calls at bad hours, explain delays to impatient building managers, and tell people that safety procedures do not change because somebody has an important deadline. The last time Lauren introduced me at her company, she called me the repair guy. In the end, I didn't stop repairing elevators. I just stopped being the emergency plan for someone who was ashamed to say what I repaired.